Supernatural Encounters, a 1050-page masterpiece. Join myself and Marcel Ryan the Revanchist as we take a peek behind the curtain in the Supernatural Encounters interviews.
Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Marcel for the first episode of our Supernatural Encounters interview series. We're joined by artist Chris Cold today. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
So, we're going to be talking about the amazing art pieces that are found in Supernatural Encounters that were created by Chris Cold as one of the artists that did the art within Supernatural Encounters. And we're going to be having a sort of discussion, open form interview today where we talk about some of these art pieces, how we got into art, how we ended up working on Supernatural Encounters. So that's what we're going to be getting into today.
For sure. Maybe we can start at the beginning. How did you get into artwork and being an artist?
Being an artist in general, I was kind of, I'm actually not really kind of like, I didn't study art. It wasn't really on my radar until later, pretty much the last year of high school. I started kind of like doing some digital stuff, essentially with Photoshop and whatever. And when I went to study psychology, by the way, so it's like completely weird. But during that, as I was like studying it, I kind of like the couple of first years when I was doing a bit of digital art, started getting a bit commissions, like some commissions and some kind of little kind of bits of work here and there. And I didn't know what that could be as a career or anything like this. But by the end of my studies, I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to do this instead. And so I took a chance, I guess, and I was just basically like, still living with my parents, whatever, and just like for a couple of years tried to do that instead of like actually getting a job for what I studied. And it turned out that I landed some random projects, kind of like indie video games, like some graphic novels, that kind of thing, some illustration work for like book covers. And it was because it was such more like of an international kind of like community overall for artists. Like you can work on any project anywhere as a freelancer, I guess. It kind of worked out because you can, you push the salary based on your skill rather than anything local. And so if you do, it's not exactly what I was doing, but suppose if you landed a book cover with some big publishing house or something, they will pay you like big money, let's say. And so it felt like that could be something more like something that you could pursue instead of just like sitting around in the same like spot, like doing local jobs. So that kind of like what attracted me first to the whole kind of aspect of like art online and like being a freelancer and like doing that stuff. And then eventually over time, I just started getting, I didn't even like, except for like the first few years, I didn't even like apply to jobs much. I just kind of like started building portfolio, and it felt like there was a really huge vacuum for like top artists. So coming like from the 90s, I mean, like I started doing this like early 2000s, that kind of thing. And it was like, I think it felt like the entry level for like digital art was very, like if you can draw like some stickman figures, you'll be all right. But it's sort of like, it's like once you start doing like a bit better, it was like these like kind of competitive kind of like jobs opportunities like that, but like they were craving good artists for like these projects. And it just basically felt like there was like a lack of artists in this kind of field. And especially if it's somebody who is not really charging that much. Like if you're like a beginner, you're not going to be overpaid too much. You're going to be, I mean, the pay was fine, but it was easy to get into because you are just trying it out, let's say. So maybe for somebody who pursues art specifically, maybe it's a bit more stressful. But for me, since like, it's like a back plan essentially, so it worked out in the end. And now I've been doing this for like 15 years, I guess.
How much has digital art changed from when you first entered the field and where it is now? Has it changed with technology changing quite a bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, technology is like it pretty much what enabled it to begin was like even the first time I started hearing it, it was like the tablets, like the Wacom tablets specifically for artists, that just started appearing, and they were very like rudimentary. They were kind of like, the prem brushes were, it was basically working kind of like janky sometimes. And it started like just like from year to year. It's sort of like every version of Photoshop had something new in there and everything. And now, like even big, like all the big kind of like 3D modeling kind of software and stuff, like all the kind of like programs that allow you to do all the complicated stuff, they just like become more and more accessible. So small projects, I would say you don't actually need those, but suppose if you wanted to, there's like a lot more to expand on. So yeah, with technology for sure got better, but in the end, I mean, I don't really like the stuff that I do is a lot of people would call it stylized very much. Like it's not like I'm not really pursuing some kind of like technical height, as opposed to like just being like, I want to like, I want to, rather than having like some kind of like level of detail I want to hit like something that's more like some kind of expression or something that like just looks in a particular way. So it's more like stylized in that sense, and it's a difference between somebody rendering like a really detailed like 3D scene versus like a painting, let's say, where it doesn't need to be perfect, but if the style is there, it's kind of like, it resonates with people better, I would say. So that's kind of like that was my attraction to beginners as well, when I started seeing like all these other artists doing this in digital, as opposed to like somebody who's like hanging in a museum. It felt like that's the kind of like it's a similar thing, but it's just done in digital essentially. And so that's kind of like what my attraction was to it as well. Like, I don't really, I do 3D when the job requires, but it's not really my primarily kind of like thing that I want to do. So yeah, but yeah, technology for sure, like a big thing for artists in general.
So you said that you got into it at the end of high school. What inspired you to start drawing? It's an open-ended question. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's valid. I get this. I mean, these are questions that people usually ask for artists as well. It's like, because art is like such a, you see it and you kind of like, hey, I would like to be doing this as well, because I have these ideas in my mind. How can I learn to put them onto canvases? Of course. Like that. And I get this every con or every kind of like people just message me with these kind of questions. So, it's what inspired me is seeing other artists basically. So it's pretty common, I would say. And it's when you see, especially when you see like maybe not tutorials exactly, but like even videos of people painting or something like process and kind of stuff, and you're like, okay, this kind of like it's not just something that you kind of get at the end of it, like you don't see just the final result, but you see the process of it, and the process itself is fun. That's why, for example, I don't have anything against for like 3D and like all these sculpting and modeling software, but for me they're like more boring in a sense because they're more technical. Yeah. So I don't like to be doing these. I don't like to figure out how a thing works. I just rather experiment and like make it work. And so when I saw all these like free-form painters and digital, it just made sense to me that that's like a cool thing to do, like as in the process itself is fun, because you're just essentially like doing what you want and then you make it work somehow. And that was like the kind of like the magic of it. I think I would say most artists are kind of like, nobody's going to do this job just for money, because I mean, it's not like being a dentist, let's say. It's sure. And so it's like, I think most people who get into this, they kind of get for the same reason, where they see how somebody like draws something and they can, a good artist can make something look good with just like a few kind of strokes, a few brush strokes or whatever. And it looks like, even if it's a sketch, and they know how to make it look good. And it's when you see this, it's kind of like what inspires you to be like, hey, I want to learn this skill, because it's putting something quickly from your imagination. That's kind of like the attraction, I guess. Yeah. So that was kind of for me as well.
For sure.
What are the challenges and benefits that you find with digital art in comparison to physical art?
I mean, it's mainly faster, basically. It's you can get the same results, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of people You know, Magic the Gathering, for example.
Yeah.
So for Magic, they hire a lot of like top illustrators, and some of them choose to because it's not really deadline heavy. So like Magic doesn't really pressure that much. They just kind of like, hey, you know, for the next couple of months we have like this kind of next set coming out. How much time do you have? How many illustrations can you get done? And I say, okay, I'm not really busy, so I can do like a handful or whatever. And people can say, like people who work for Magic, they can say, hey, I'll do traditional for this one. You know, like they basically do like with full oils instead of digital. And you can make that choice. It's just going to take you longer. So the quality is not, I suppose for some cases, I would say the quality is better for digital because you simply can, at this point anyway, you can just do 20K resolution on a painting and it's going to print always well. So you can do like these high-res images, but in principle, you can also do that in traditional scan and maybe touch up a little bit, and it's fine as well. So in the end, for the only thing that matters, I would say, if you know, you can do either, but if you work in some kind of pipeline, like on video games or something like that, like full-time, you have to do digital because you're just not gonna be able to keep up in traditional section. But that's the only thing. Like, it's basically like just the speed of it. Like in digital, it's just, you know, you can undo things, you can like layer things really fast, like all that stuff. So it's just really just the ease of it. But the rest, the techniques are kind of the same.
So it looks, I mean, in looking at your art, and I wasn't even aware before today that you drew for Magic the Gathering, but we'll talk about it a little later, I think, because there's some amazing art there. But it looks like you're drawing a lot of fantasy and sci-fi themed art, you know, horror elements, that kind of thing. So I guess the natural question that flows from that is, what inspires you to draw that kind of art? You know, who are your inspirations, or what are your inspirations, if there are literary or visual inspirations that kind of gravitated you towards that style?
I think it's kind of same. It's kind of what you see as a kid, I guess. And what I was, you know, when you're growing up in like the 90s or whatever, and you have like these like fantasy games coming up, and like the movies are starting to catch up as all these, you know, like Star Wars is the 80s, whatever. But you know, like this kind of era where technology allows for entertainment to be like these, you know, fantastical worlds essentially, as opposed to just being Casablanca or something like that, let's say. So I mean, great movie, but and so it's like when you grow up with that, I think it like feeds you a little bit. Where, you know, like the first games that I play and the first movies that I see is all these kind of, you know, Diablo and you know, Warcraft, and like movies like Lord of the Rings started coming out and all this kind of things. And it's like, it just feels like something that it's a bit more than just, you know, like a story between like humans. You know, it feels like there's like a little more, that like a little more creativity involved in just like building out the world, like the world. That's essentially what I do for pretty much all projects. Is I'm kind of like building, like, you know, world building is kind of my main thing. I do story illustrations a lot too, but it's when I'm hired for anything, people ask me like, okay, we have this project, we don't know what anything looks like, so you're the guy. And like, I'm basically like kind of like working with them, like, okay, well, what's the vibe, what's the atmosphere, and then I'm kind of like putting the visuals for that. And that's what always stuck with me when all these fantasy games and movies and all these, you know, sci-fi movies were coming out. It was essentially like me looking like, whoa, this is nothing like what we have now on Earth. So that's the kind of like, that's what's stuck in my brain, that like to be, hey, I want to be doing that as well. So that's happening.
That's awesome. In a lot of the art I've seen in your portfolios, there seems to be a very stark contrast between like dark and light, and that seems like one of the main themes throughout all of your art pieces. Would you say that that's one of the main themes that is found in all of your art pieces?
Yeah, I would say contrast for sure is something that I exploit a lot, because it's a lot of the things is also, I would say, you know, when you read, for example, comics or even manga is black and white usually. And so they only rely, let's say, on, because it's also faster to do, let's say you don't need to color, but it's kind of, they rely on just the readability of shapes. So like when you see a figure of a person or an object or whatever, and you just can outline it with like black and white, it kind of reads by contrast. So when the contrasting white background was a black shape, it reads really well. And so I think that was the first kind of like things that I was starting to learn. I would say that was something that I was learning even before I was doing digital, like when I was just sketching with pencils, let's say. And you just do, you have one pencil, you're not really like a professional artist. The thing you're trying to do is just kind of like make this contrast with the page, where you just like outline the shape. And then with digital, some of it translated, where you still do kind of like these really solid shapes, but then you can also drop like color on top or something like this, but the contrast remains. So I think that's more part of a technique, I would say, like how somebody would render it. I know some people don't do it like that. And normally if you were to learn like painting, suppose, from scratch, you learn how light hits rather than how a shape outlines. So like you outline shapes with light, essentially, and the rest is shadows. And the shadows, usually they merge because they're not a solid kind of like edge. So that's a bit more like realistic kind of thing. So maybe in my art, the reason why it's a bit more like striking, I guess, in that sense, is because you like it's stylized in that sense as well. Like, let's say comic books or manga, where you deliberately make a shape really harsh outlined with contrast, and it just reads like the main subject better instead of like making it realistic all the time. So there's some realistic aspects to it, but not fully. So that's basically I would say it's specifically a technique kind of question, but that's just my preferred way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah.
So leading more into Star Wars, then, what was your? Because you said that you weren't. I think when we were talking a bit offline, you weren't super familiar with the extended universe of Star Wars books.
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
Go for it. I want to hear.
Yeah. I knew the movies, of course, like like all the stuff, but it's. I remember like Joe, he like emailed me, like I don't know, like 4 years ago, something like that. I remember when it first started, because it wasn't like the project wasn't finished by any means by then. He was just kind of. I think at the beginning I just started doing a couple of pieces. There've been like breaks in between. But when he first emailed me, he's like, "Hey, I'm working on this like book for Star Wars. Like Star Wars themed kind of." He was very vague about it. He wasn't like going into details. And it's like, and he needed illustrations basically. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I didn't really think of Star Wars. Maybe like the Sith kind of side, or like Darth Vader kind of thing would be my kind of style, because I do a bit darker kind of things. But he wasn't giving me like any specifics, and I told him kind of like a similar thing, like, "Hey, I don't know if if you went through my stuff, but it's pretty dark. Like, I don't know if you want like that kind of thing." And he was like, "No, this is going to be a bit darker. Like, this is not going to be like this is not going to be the Ewoks or whatever, like so." So I was basically, he was like kind of like trying to tell me like that, without telling me too much, trying to say like, "Hey, yeah, I like what you're doing with your style. It's going to fit fine." So I talked with him a little bit, and the first illustration, I think, is the one, I don't know, I think it's one of the first that shows up in the book as well, was the, sorry, I forgot the name. The protagonist is basically getting dragged by the, into the void thing by the, sorry, I have them pulled up here, but I forgot which order they were, unfortunately.
Yeah, so you're referring to the picture where I believe that the protagonist Arhul Hextrafon is basically being taken by the shadows.
Yes, his library and everything. And we were even talking. I was talking to Joe, and it's like, would he have, like, I asked him, like, would he have like books, because he's like this kind of learned like person where he kind of like studies this, like some of the stuff, like would he have like, as this, even from sentimental standpoint, would he possibly have a library of like actual books, because everything is technology back then,
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, this could be this could make sense, because it's like, even now, like I, for example, I don't really care about reading a physical book, but I just like how they look on shelves. So I just keep them for even, like I stack them up. So I was like asking these kind of questions, and he was like, yeah. And like, like I was telling him like, it's going to be like this borderline abstract piece where everything is like chaotic. Like even the horizon line is like tilted, like everything in the piece is kind of like skewed. So he was like, yeah, we for sure want this. So after that piece, I was like, okay, this seems to be like my style. So
Yeah, the book does have a much darker tone than really
Mhm.
anything that's come before it. Do we have that piece, Brennan? Can we pull it up? Do you have it? Do you have access
I
to it?
do.
I have access to it, but it's cut up because it's the PDF, so it's
Yeah,
cut in half.
that's how I have it as well.
Okay.
I
Well, I
could.
guess-
Can I drop a screenshot in like chat or something, or like how
You
do we?
You can share your screen by hitting present.
Well, I don't mind throwing it up now. Just
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a bit.
it's going to be a little. It's going to be cut in half just because of the way that the PDF is formatted.
Yeah.
So, do you see it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, so this is the first part right over here,
Mhm.
and it's basically it's a two-parter, right? So putting
Yeah,
them together. So you see the shadows here, and you see the hands grasping,
Yep.
and like you said, Chris, like everything kind of looks almost like off kilter, like slanted. And you have Hex over here, the protagonist, and the books are kind of flying. It's an incredible piece. It's actually the first piece that I saw associated with supernatural encounters, and it drew me
first one
in.
that I've done as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any visual reference for the character of Arhul Hextraphon, like his appearance?
I the only I think references that I had that like Joseph kind of insisted, well, not insisted, but he was giving me, it was mostly for there was one piece with a bunch of well, there were a couple of pieces, I suppose, but there was the main one that that was like probably the biggest piece, was all the like Sith and all the guys that were like at the entrance to the
Yeah.
yeah, that was the only one where he was saying, because these were, it was a bit of a difficult piece. I think I went through a lot of like drafts for it, because it was like I wasn't sure what kind of scale to do, because there were a lot of characters, and each of them, it wasn't just sort of sorry, I'm jumping around, but you know,
No.
so it was like that piece was difficult, because it was like it wasn't like sort of, hey, let's do just a bunch of like robed Sith in the back, and they all kind of be, you know, like just kind of like a silhouettes or something like this. Each of them had to be like looking individually. So each character, he had like some pulled up like fan arts and like random kind of stuff. So I had to like kind of like check and study like how to make them like work on one canvas. Like that was a difficult one. But this one, or like these kind of like essentially like every piece that just has like one thing going on, even if it's two characters, it's like one action kind of like happening. That's usually like compositionally, that's not too hard to pull off. Well, like I don't really like struggle with that kind of thing, so I don't really like use references unless it's something like, you know, unless Joe says we need this part to be looking like that specifically. I'm kind of like just going based on his descriptions from the book.
Yeah.
So
was this the picture that you were referring to?
Yeah, this is the one.
That's an incredible piece of art.
We
Yeah,
love
this
piece. A lot of these characters are pre-established characters who have been in lots of material and reference material. So it was really exciting to see all of them and be able to recognize some of them.
Yeah, there were a lot. I mean, some references where it's because this also, like from what I understand, this spanned a lot of time, like in the past, like all this extended kind of universe stuff.
Yeah.
So when he sent me like just links and like wiki documents and like all this stuff for reference, it was like somewhere like really old, like the art was like from the 80s, let's say, or something like that, and it was just kind of like, you know, like basically like old school kind of like drawings, and some were like a bit more modern. So it was like I was like trying to figure out, maybe some because of that, some are more vague, because I wasn't like, I didn't try to like overdo it a little on the details. Like I wanted to be, you know, at least resembling on how it was in the, you know, in whatever fan art or whatever, like he was referencing. So.
How familiar were you with, you know, H.P. Lovecraft, for instance, before you started working on Supernatural Encounters?
I knew Lovecraft pretty well. Sure, I knew like I knew all these. Yeah, I mean, I knew horror like as a genre pretty well, I would say.
Yeah,
like all these kind of like cult classics and kind of like these subgenres essentially. But it was I was sort of like, again, when we first started talking, it wasn't like I didn't get these like horror vibes until I started working on it already.
Right.
So, but I had like reservations about like Star Wars, I was I like Star Wars, but like for me to paint Star Wars, I was kind of like unsure. And then after this first piece was was all the hands pulling the guy in, like he was like, yeah, we like it like that, all cool. And I was like, okay, if you like this, then we can, I'll push a little further, like somewhere, later. We'll see how that works. So that was kind of like how it worked out.
How long did the pieces take for the pieces that you did for Supernatural Encounters? Did they take longer than like other pieces that you might do, just because of the directions with stuff specific to the text, or did they take about normal time?
Maybe some like that. That piece with the many characters was for sure like longer, but it was mostly. I did send you a sketch. That was one of the rough sketches that kind of didn't make it. It was like a ship kind of in the back, but the entry, it was for this piece, but it was just a completely different take. So even the composition was different and stuff. But as I was going through, like, let's say a complicated piece like this, I was like, the main problem is not even like trying to make the characters individually like look kind of like similar to what it was. It was, it's composed in a piece where it has 12 distinct characters or something, and it's like, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, do I bend the perspective a bit here? Like, what do I do? Do I make it all flat and then standing on the stairs? Do I do a bit like look from above and it's going to look awkward because, you can't see like frontal view. And so it was more like figuring out what kind of angle and perspective and just composition would work. So it was a lot of kind of like trial and error with just sketching and just figuring out what kind of like just the layout of the piece would be. And also because like you show in the previews, like, yeah, it's split between 2 pages. So essentially all of them had to fit. The piece is technically like 2 pages, like it's wide, but all of them had to fit on 1 page. So it was like, a bit of an extra kind of problem there. So it was essentially like trying to figure out these, this is more like kind of like technical things of like how you format the book and everything. So if I work on books, it's not uncommon to have these problems or like these kind of like, figuring out like these things. But yeah, some pieces were definitely more complicated than others. Some were like normal, some I can do technically. It just painting could be, whatever, a weekend, let's say. Like, just basically doing like a rough draft, showing it to Joe, then he replies a bit, and then I'm finishing up. So, it's fine. But then pieces like this, it's kind of like trial and error all the time, and it can go on for whatever, a week. And yeah, it's overall, I don't recall, because I worked with him on like a handful of pieces first, and then I think he got I don't really know like the exact like kind of like budget split that he was like trying to do, but it was like basically there was like a bit of a break, and then I worked on a few more pieces with him for like a month or two, and then it was like the break for the Kickstarter or something like that, and then like it was like a longer break, and then I finished up I think some of these characters, not characters, but these kind of characters and creatures, I guess. They were like just singular page illustrations more, not like these wide scenery pieces. So it was like 3 over 3 kind of like separate periods that I worked on them. Maybe in total, if it was like all together, maybe I could finish all of them within like 3 months, maybe something like that. Like, but it's hard to tell individually because like pieces can be really different. Like one can take a week to work through, and another can be like just 2 days. So.
Yeah.
Right. I threw up a picture there, Brennan. I don't know if it's showing on your end. Yeah. We'll wait until it's on the screen.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Was this the picture that you were referring to, Chris?
This was also a sketch that essentially this one is the stylized version. In the end, kind of like the changes that I made to it were to make like a more kind of galaxy starry kind of like look to it, where it's a bit more realistic. But there was a different sketch for that piece specifically with all the like Sith and all the guys standing on the stairs, except it was like a different perspective with there was like a ship landing in the back, and they were a bit all smaller, kind of mixing with the crowd.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was like one of the first sketches I've done. And basically talking to Joe, it was like we want to see kind of like a more direct view of each character. So in the end, I kind of went with the flat stairs that show them all frontal. So that was kind of like one of the kind of hurdles where, you know.
I have this piece right here. I can. Oh, Marcel's got it too.
Yeah. So this was the one.
So this is one of the sketches. Yeah, it was basically because from the descriptions in the book, it felt, or at least the first time I was reading this, it felt like the kind of like the temple and this scenario was also important. So I was trying to pull it back a bit to like an overview and just like show a bit of like what the you know the surroundings would look like and all that. But in the end, we decided just basically like, hey, you know, the characters kind of like need to show individually a bit more, and just basically, you know, instead of like kind of mixing into the background a bit more. So in the end, I was like trying to experiment how to put them like, you know, on the stairs, still have like these kind of like the you know, like the deserty, like almost Egyptian kind of like style temple and all this stuff, and just basically pull them up on like kind of almost flat angle on the stairs where just all of them can be frontal and nothing is like kind of like at an odd angle. So that was in the end what it was. But this was like one of the sketches where it would be the same idea. There's like crowd kind of like bowing to them and all that stuff. They, you know, like worship them basically. Well,
right. That's essentially what it is. So,
yeah. So it was kind of like just a few iterations on like what this could look like from compositionally. And so that sketch kind of didn't work for us. So in the end, it turned out that one was the close upstairs kind of with all them standing. But yeah.
Do you, out of curiosity, do you have a favorite piece that you did for this project?
A favorite piece? Let me look up. I have them all here. I like that was one of the more abstract ones. Is the one with the like the Ouroboros space worm basically like chasing its own tail.
Yeah.
I like space stuff in general, and this one is like cosmic horror kind of thing. So that was like that wasn't even like super detailed in how Joseph was like describing it. So I was like, okay, I'll try something like, you know, it was like a star system in the middle, something like that. And he was like, yeah, cool, let's go forward with that. So that was a bit more, you know, free form for me, I guess. That worked out. I like the piece also with the statues in the like these kind of like statues that were awakening, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think I actually have that, because that's another one that's broken up in the the text. I might have a full picture of that one.
The one of Arhul and his droid amidst the Hall of Statues. Yep.
Yeah, that's another favorite of mine. But I mean, I kind of like, because this you know, this project was pretty like easygoing. Was like there wasn't really like, hey, you need to finish this by tomorrow or anything like that. It was like kind of, I could take my time a bit with like doing it how I would want it as well, like as in take it to a level where I would also be satisfied, as opposed to just like getting it done. And so it was, you know, I'm pretty happy with how a lot of these turn out. So
yeah, my apologies. I'm going to share the screen. I don't have it together. I thought I might have. It's going to be broken up into two separate pages.
Maybe you can do like some post edits and just like fade it in a bit when we talk about it.
Yeah, I have it here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is the cover for one of the editions of the book, and so that's the first part. And then of course we can scroll down to see the second part, and then you have Hex and Q9. But I mean, like, just magnificent and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like, yeah, a lot of this is like you said, Lovecraftian in a way, where it's like, you know, it's almost like you get into the mountain of madness, and that all these creatures. Yeah,
you have these colossuses, and the terrifying knowledge that they might hold within.
It sounds like Joe gave you some portions of the actual text to read for constructing the art pieces, rather than just like descriptions. How much of the text were you given to read at a time? Like paragraphs, pages?
There were some that were pretty hefty, like maybe a couple of pages, like maybe up to 3 pages at a time or something like that. Like that was, I think it was mostly for pieces. Like there were some pieces that were sort of. I felt like it was more. Well, I think that's kind of like the reason why Joseph also wanted me to like read more, rather than him kind of condensing it to a description. He wanted like a whole text because there's a lot of contextual information that maybe could have been, important. I mean, in the end, like it's also up to his like in the end, I'm showing a piece to him, and he says, yeah, that works well. But so sometimes it would be when, like, for example, with the space worm, it was sort of like him, hey, we need like this piece. He was like basically just like simplifying it because I'm not sure how that would be. If you have like part of this in a book, I'm not sure how the piece would be perceived by anything that would be like in text and character or something like this. Like there wouldn't be like a clear composition for it, let's say. And so Joseph was sort of like saying like, hey, we kind of need a piece that's like about like something like that, something like this, and just like kind of general terms. And then he would wait for me to do like some sketching, essentially. And then he's like, yeah, you know what? It's like this is good. Let's go with kind of like this. And so essentially, it would be he would in those cases he would kind of like judge himself what would be the better direction. But normally, yeah, he would give me like some paragraphs or some, like basically taking out some stuff from the book or whatever he had written at that time, and just give me like a full kind of unedited text, and I would read it, and whatever whatever imagery I would imagine, I would just put it into sketches, and then we would discuss on how to do it. But yeah, it was both. Like sometimes it would be just like something that's more shortened that he kind of like wrote down just to simplify it, and sometimes it would be like straight up from the book. So,
did you have any contact with the other artist on the project, Guillaume Ducros?
No, I didn't really have any contact with like anybody. Pretty much Joe is the only one I talked to. So it was. I think I don't think we were working like in parallel. I think what happened is like sometimes I worked, or rather, I think the first time that he contacted, it was me. I did a few pieces, and then like maybe it wasn't like overlapping, so I don't think I maybe wouldn't even have a chance to, because I think he worked with the other artists. I'm not sure, but I think that what happened. I mean, it's not uncommon. So I think I worked with him. Then he kind of like there was a bit of a pause for me, and then he worked with another artist, and then came back. Like I worked with him, that kind of thing. But yeah, I haven't interacted with anybody except for Joseph, basically, on the project.
Have you seen some of those other art pieces by the other artists?
Yeah, I did see some. Yeah. That everything is good. Yeah.
Yeah, we were wondering beforehand, because the remarkably consistent styles. I mean, obviously you can tell the artistic differences between both artists, and I'm not saying otherwise, but you don't want the styles to be too contrasting in a work like this, or you want them to be consistent. So we had wondered if there was a intentionality behind that consistency, or if it was just I guess Joe working to hire two artists that had similar styles for the kind of tone that he wanted to convey with this work.
Yeah, I think so. I think Joe. I think basically he just kind of like went like with his own kind of like principle, and just like went like, hey, I want like this guy and this guy look good to me. Let's work with these, as opposed to like just. I feel like he would be picky in a sense. He wasn't picky when working with me, but I think he would be like picky with who he would hire, essentially.
Yeah.
So he was like, I think even when he was talking to me, he was like, I'm telling him like, hey, I'm not sure about Star Wars. I do like dark stuff, and he was like insistent. So I think the reason for him is that he kind of picked out like people that he knew kind of like would work for the style, for whatever the case. So yeah, I think he just basically found like good choices there, as opposed to just kind of like making like hiring whoever's available and then kind of like making them work it out. So
yeah.
We have some questions about an art piece depicting Darth Dreadwar, who is a character who was depicted here for the very first time, and he's very like ring wraith. Like you mentioned, Lord of the Rings earlier. He's very Lord of the Rings-esque in appearance. Did you take visual cues from Lord of the Rings in constructing the art piece for Dreadwar?
Well, actually, Joe did send me a reference where, so because I think you mentioned this to me before, and I actually do recall that when we were talking about some of these characters, and specifically this one, Joseph did link me a few pieces, kind of without any kind of description, just sort of like, hey, this is the character, and it's basically like some description and stuff, and he's like, like this kind of an enigma in a way. And so the way the references were shown is essentially was like this kind of like caped, kind of like ghostly, almost like a Dementor from kind of like Harry Potter in a way.
Yeah.
And he was like the way we kind of like the way like it felt to me is like, even in say original movies, Darth Vader and all these guys, I think like a lot of this inspiration does come from these like more fantasy myths as well. So I don't think I don't think there's that big of a disconnect, because like when I look at Darth Vader, I kind of picture like, so Darth Vader is like a sci-fi Sauron. So, well, not Sauron, but like this kind of figure where it's like an imposing, even design wise, it's not a really like complicated design. Like the helmet has a bit going on, but it's like, all black pretty much. And it's like simple shape, but it's very striking because it's like that's like, it's almost like almost a simplistic design. And it's because of that. It's the same thing with like all these, ring, like the Nazgul and all these guys in Lord of the Rings. And I felt like this was the direction for this guy as well, where I didn't feel good about making them very intricate. Like as in, I didn't want like some kind of like patterns. I didn't want anything like, decorative in a way. Like he would have to feel like primal in a sense, like just like, oh, this guy's like creepy at the base of his like existence. He's not like some dude that has, a necklace or anything like decorative and something like that. He's the guy that's going to be, like essentially like a Darth Vader, but like in a more primal form, where even like it's like all kind of like a bit tattered and like kind of like very well, basically creepy. And so yeah, I mean, in a sense, sure, it's very similar, but it wasn't like the Lord of the Rings inspiration. It was more like, even talking to Joseph, like the things that he was showing me were kind of like leaning in the same direction. So I didn't feel like bad about like doing this kind of like in this simplified kind of creepy ghostly form.
Yeah, he definitely gives off Dementor sort of spectral vibes. I get that from the art. It's ironic. I don't know if Brennan knows this, but Brennan, I'm gonna throw it up on screen if you share it. But Chris did the Lord of the Rings Nazgul Magic the Gathering card.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wrong screen.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it reverted back. Yeah, there you go. So that's an amazing piece.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's another of the Witch King that I did.
Oh, did you did the Witch King? Here, let me find it.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, they were just coming out like this year recently, so I didn't even post them on any of my websites, but I think they came out in all of them.
Yes, I had the window open earlier, and now it's gone. You said they're all on your website.
It's called no, they're not on my website. I think you just have to Google. I think it's like called like the Black Breakfast. Like let me check.
Oh, Wraith King, I think. Wraith King, right? Is that?
No. Wraith King is
something else.
I'm not sure if it was released. I don't know. I mean,
oh, okay.
Maybe I'm trying to spoil this too much. Hold on.
Oh, well, what I guess what I will ask is kind of veering away from Supernatural Encounters, but we'll come back to it because there's still several art pieces that I think are worth discussing. But what was it like working with Wizards of the Coast?
Oh, it's been fun. I mean, I've been working with them like 4 years now, maybe 5, something like that. It's the way illustrators work with them is kind of like you sign up with them essentially, and then they kind of give you, whenever you're free, they kind of ask you beforehand, and then they give you assignments. So they ask you like, hey, we're working on this deck, and then if you say, hey, like in the next couple of months I'm free, I can take like these many illustrations or whatever. You just kind of work with them. But if you're busy, they're not really pressuring you. So it's not full-time work, but it's like kind of, I work with them like just a handful of times every year, let's say. And so it's like, it's pretty easy, but they have a lot of, they have a shit ton. Sorry, maybe this should be.
Yeah, no, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. They have like a lot of writers, a lot of artists signed up for the like company, and so they kind of just throw around who's like the best for the job, essentially. So they kind of like can pick and choose. They're pretty big, so they essentially like can throw money around for any artist they want. And so they can, whenever a deck, like for example, a horror deck comes out, then they're like, hey, how about this guy? Because he's like more horror affiliated. And then something else comes out where it's like super colorful. They may not ask me, though they did for some reason, but like they're kind of like they're a bit more like free floating in that sense. But it's pretty, it's really easy kind of to just get in and out. If I work on something else, it's no big deal if I skip a set or something like that, or a deck, and then I work on something else myself, and then another time they just like get back to me and like, hey, you want to work on this one instead? And sure. So it's it's pretty cool.
So they kind of have a pool of artists with different styles, so they pool artists for whatever style they're going for.
Yeah, it's essentially, I don't think it's even the style specifically. It's more like even the thematic, because it's like, for example, some artists are just like really good at like evoking like creepy kind of like visuals, or like some others are more like, for example, there was Strixhaven, which is like this, like it has a lot of colorful stuff with the magic schools. So there's some creepy stuff. Like I've done some stuff for that set, for example, but it's a lot of it is also colorful, with like kind of elemental magics and all the things, and maybe not exactly what I would do, but they can like more, they can aim more with the artists that do already colorful stuff, not even stylistically, but just like thematically. Like if somebody works with more colorful things, it's just like kind of going to be easier for them to take it. So yeah, they have like thousands of artists have been signed up, so it's pretty easy for them to do this.
I'm gonna share my absolute favorite of your Magic the Gathering cards. If Brennan can throw it up here, let me. And the name itself is amazing, but here, share. That is terrifying. Sulfum Mayhem Dominus.
Yeah, I posted this one actually recently on my like socials, but yeah, this one is they have like this whole kind of like subset of creatures that are from like this Phyrexia kind of like.
Yeah, Phyrexia, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're like these guys. This guy has like others impaled there and everything. So
right.
Like there's like little guys on the spikes. So yeah, it's.
I have a follow-up question. Do you listen to music while you draw? Are you listening to anything, or are you like?
Oh yeah, I
do.
I do have like I have like a work. If I need to get something done quickly, I have a specific playlist. But otherwise, it's just kind of if I can take my time, I'll listen to kind of like whatever, maybe something new or something. But I have like I'm like mentally conditioning myself that with a playlist, it's kind of like when you go to a gym and you have like your workout playlist, and you're like you start like going. So it's like for work, if I have like only a week to finish something, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to this, because the playlist starts and I'm like, okay, my brain gets in the same headspace to finish it up. But otherwise, I listen to like a lot of I listen to a lot of soundtracks actually, if it's not pressing. Like a lot of kind of like video game soundtracks, movie soundtracks, Skyrim kind of stuff, Warcraft soundtracks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but otherwise, there's lots of like Tool, Metallica. Like
I was gonna ask, what's on that specific playlist?
Yeah, those are the ones that like I need to like when I put on like songs that last 16 minutes a piece. Like that's when I need to finish work. That's when it's kind of getting a bit stressful.
Yeah, makes sense. Going back to Supernatural Encounters, I do have a couple other pieces we can throw up and talk about here. Let's see here. I already got it up. I'm going to share screen again. This one I actually have fully, even though it was cut, because I put it together myself, or I thought I did. Hold on a second. Okay, let's try that again. Cancel, present, screen, window. Here we go. Yeah. That's the one.
We have sketches of that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one was also complicated.
I bet. I love your artistic interpretations of characters that were drawn in this Alan Moore comic from way back in the day.
Yeah, those are the references that I got. I was like, okay, I'll try, but you know.
Because I mean, you know, we have the pyramidal structure in the back, which is Splendid App, and you know, he's this like pink pyramid, and you drew him as this imposing, dark, looming pyramid.
Yeah, I was Joe's also, when we were talking, he showed me like the references, and I was like, does this need to be like this color coded? Because it was pretty much, you know, it's how comics work in a way. You have to color code it to make like different shapes.
Right.
But I was asking him like, hey, can I make this more like, I make all of this dark more or less, and then I just kind of like separate by, you know, light effects, like that kind of thing, and just like make it like a bit more, you know, I guess cinematic in a sense, where it's like not, you know, not like a comic book style where it's everything like outline. And he was, you know, like after sketching and stuff, he was like, yeah, okay, let's go with this. So, you know, eventually I just started. Well, the guys on the right, they're all like all these like basically abominations.
Yeah.
So surprisingly, these were like easier to figure out. Because it was like you know, it was like the descriptions and kind of like the actual like, you know, the things that needed to be like the things that I needed to hit for them were more abstract in a sense. So I could kind of like make them, you know, I could like the cube, I think, is the only one, because it's like it has to be a cube, you know, like the shape has to be like cubish, but the rest is like kind of like amorphic, like a little bit. So I could kind of like, you know, improvise a little bit with the shapes and how I can pose them, because there's a lot of things going, like with 7 characters on in one piece, there's a lot of space taken away by each, and to make all of them like look because all of them are like unique design, it's not like sort of like soldiers in a line where it doesn't matter if you render out the one last in line, because they will look approximately the same as the first one. These guys all look unique, so even the guy that's like in the back has to have like a unique kind of like look and presence to them. So it was like the you know, the struggle with these kind of pieces, same as with all the, you know, like the guys on the stairs. It was like how to compose to make them all kind of like have a bit some of equivalence on the canvas.
I have a very specific question about this piece. What was you know, like the woman in the green dress, you know, Tilotny is her name. She's kind of holding out her hand, and it almost has like, it almost looks like Michelangelo's like Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, it is a bit of that. Yeah, it was kind of like also like when we were talking about it, it was like it was almost like, hey, look, how can we do like some creationist moment here, you know, like this kind of thing. So that was partially the inspiration, for sure.
Amazing.
What, did Joe also ask that you keep her with like sort of green colors?
Oh yeah, that was one of the. I think for her it made the most sense for me, because the other guys, they could at least put like they had like in the, you know, whatever the original comics were, they had like some like the basic geometric shapes were outlined by like these kind of like, you know, the planet had like a face or whatever, and it was like kind of, you know, I figured like I'm gonna do like these parts more color coded, so like the planet has like the red color, because they needed to be color differentiated. But in the end, for you know, the god is kind of like the, you know, like it was more, you know, it felt like that would be the most kind of natural way to make like the entire like persona to be like color embedded. Like, because it's also frontal, and it's kind of like she's taking up like the front here. She's a bit more on like you know, like I don't want to say like leading role, but in a way she's like she's like, in a sense, at least for the image, she's leading in the presence in a sense. So for her, it was like it was better, instead of having like a dark silhouette, it was more important to have like a bit more color and a bit more like light in general. So it made sense for her, but I wouldn't want to have like just a pink pyramid in the background or something like that. So that one was more kind of silhouette and then like some lights in to break up the shape. So that was kind of that was more like an artistic decision, I would say. So
another question about this. So Tilotny, her face, when you draw human faces or human-like faces, are you basing them off of people that you like? Do you have a specific person in mind when you're drawing a face?
Well, sometimes I guess not for this one. I would say if it needed to hit like a specific expression or something like that, like if I were, let's say, to do, like if Joe or like any other book, let's say, or any like graphic novel story illustration, if the necessity was for a character to be, let's say, very expressively like angry or anguished or sad or something like that, I would like, what immediately would occur in my brain is like, hey, what is like a really sad movie that I saw, and I would pick out like a sad character from there, and that would be I would basically look for an expression. It wouldn't be so much for the character, but I just wouldn't want to get like a lot of times what happens when you try to do like emotions that are like have to deeply connect with somebody. If you do it without reference, without actually looking, I mean, some artists are that good, but like maybe I'm not with expressions. And so for me, it would be like I wouldn't be that comfortable to, let's say, try to make, what's like a good example? Well, like since we're like on traditional art, this piece with Lucifer, like the fallen angel, where he has like the arm and like a tear runs from it. Yeah, so that's like a really powerful expression. And if I were, because that also came up with some references, obviously not for this, but in the end I didn't use it. But if I let's say wanted to express something similar, I would want maybe like a screenshot or photo, something from a movie or from maybe somebody from some photographer that I know, or something like that, where I could reference it because a person already expressed it. It would be way more genuine if I could reference that, as opposed to like trying to fake it myself in a sense. So some people really can do that like really well, and I just like, I'm kind of like more in the horror kind of like stuff where I'm doing like monsters and like like creatures and stuff. So maybe for me was like specifically like these deep character emotions would be a bit more difficult. So that's where I would rely on references. But generally, like just a face or just like a general kind of angry, like expression is fine.
Is this the one you're referring to?
Yeah, like it's very expressive. So
yeah.
So I picture
we can show it on screen because he's not completely nude.
Right. Yeah. So I picture even all these old traditional masters and all these like old Renaissance painters and all these guys, they would have studios where they would invite models and just basically like have this thing kind of reference for them. Yeah. And a lot of the times that's how you get these good expressions, because you just want the idea, if the goal is to capture something genuine, you want it genuine from the reference. And so that's kind of like how it goes.
This art piece that I'm going to share right now is a personal favorite from the book of mine. The sense of scale with this piece, with this gigantic looming horned figure, is really epic in scale to me, to where it's kind of breathtaking when I first saw it, because just how huge this figure is. Was this piece hard to draw, to make the distinctions between the smaller character, the bigger character, since they share the same color?
Well, I mean, on a technical aspect, like from a technical side, this piece is actually very simple, like in terms of like how to draw it. But I mean, this one was as a personal piece. This was something that with personal pieces, what happens, I think, with a lot of artists that reach some level. Not that I'm like I mean, I'm by no means like the greatest or anything, but like at some level, like after you are like above a medium kind of artist, you kind of get this thing where, you go into the shower and you're like, hey, I have this idea, and you already know what it looks like. So the technical issue, like it kind of disappears because you already know how this is drawn, essentially. So the only difficulty is like actually thinking up of something that looks good. And so when you're rendering this out, or like when I'm rendering this out, it's like the thing that, if anything, I think what gives this piece an edge is like the subtle colors, like this pieces of red and stuff. That's what separates the shapes best, I would say. When I was drawing this, I think the reason why this came out as very monotone is because, like we talked before, I was doing this more kind of almost line artsy, where I was doing this just by shape. So I was kind of like doing just high, like black and white, just contrast kind of thing. And then what happened, I hit this kind of like moment where I have like this big shape in the back, and like you say, yeah, they overlap, and they're like both kind of like dark, like this charcoal kind of like skin demons. And essentially, like at that point, I was like, well, I have to like drop, atmospherics and color and like fog and all that stuff. And that's the thing that basically separates the shape. So it's essentially, once you know like these techniques, it's not really like on a technical level, it's not like really that hard to pull off. So it's like this is these kind of pieces, personal ones. It's kind of like about the conception of it. Like, hey, like I want to draw this, and then it's kind of like the execution is like easier to do than the actual like figuring out what the piece is. So yeah, but it's also a favorite of mine because it's kind of like, the scale. There isn't really much going on in the background, but it only enforces the scale because there isn't like landmarks. You just kind of like almost have clouds. So it was fun to work on because it's in a way simple, because it's just two shapes, like two characters, and monsters, whatever. And
it's awesome. I think it's really cool.
I have another question about process, if I can throw up. So this is the sketch that you sent us. We're going to throw that up there so people can see it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the sketch. I'm going to leave it up there for maybe like another 5 seconds so people have it. And I'm going to show people what the final product looks like. Okay. So stop sharing. And then this is the final product. So we can see that the placement is a bit different from the sketch. I think that the droid was on the other side. And so let me ask you a question. Like the perspective has shifted now. How does something like that come about? Is that like through discussing it with Joe, or is it, you look at the sketch that you've done and you think, maybe it would look better from this angle? And then how long, I guess, follow up to that is, how long would it take to get from that sketch to this finished product?
Well, this piece had also a few kind of hurdles in a sense that it wasn't. I wasn't like super clear on what the scale of the interior should be at first. I mean, I knew it would have to encompass like, there would be like multiple characters and people at this like stands, but I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be like the Senate thing was, what in the prequels where Palpatine is and there's just these seats and it's all the same kind of thing. So I wasn't sure like how to scale it. So in the sketch, what came up was Joe as well is like, I showed him the sketch and he's like, he liked the overall kind of like, he liked the mood. It was the light from above, like this kind of like highlight kind of, almost like it's kind of, the usual kind of like sci-fi lighting in a way. It's kind of in a sense. Yeah. And so he liked that stuff, but we were talking and we were like, okay, but can we put a bit, we were discussing like, can we put like more distance between things? And like some of these changes basically came out with like a little more sketching. So it was like, I was kind of like changing it up a bit within the sketch, just quick things just to show how it could be, pulled back, kind of like distance between, characters and figures, and then putting like these figures up top, like on these like balconies in a way, on these kind of like areas, was basically just to also like adapt to like this space has to be like a bit bigger, so there's people like potentially walking underneath, like that kind of thing. So it was all like this was more like about adjusting the like scale more than anything. So it was like after the sketch was done, and Joe was like, "Okay, well, let's just make it bigger." I've done like another one just to like change the like sizes of the figures, like move the the robot and the corpse and all that stuff like a bit further, kind of like back, make it smaller, that sort of thing. And after that, since after everything was clear, like on how it would be, I've done like there was an intermediate kind of like rough draft that I showed Joe as well, just to make sure. And then he's like, yeah, okay, let's just like finish up with this one. And then I kind of like finished up to basically to polish it up. And so this one specifically, I do remember kind of going back and forth on this one with Joe. I don't know, maybe this one was, it definitely wasn't as long as like the, was all the like abominations, or was the like characters on the stairs.
Yeah.
Maybe within like 4 days, kind of like worth of work, like just sketch usually takes like a couple of sketches can be an hour, let's say 2 hours. Then I send it to Joe, then we kind of like talk about it. Maybe it's like another hour, like kind of back and forth. Sometimes it's just emails, like talking back and forth, just like a few notes. And then after I get to do like a color draft, like just basically like a bit more polished, kind of like to show how it could look in the final. Maybe that's another few hours, like another day. And then like after that's final, I kind of like, I work a bit, like I work on the piece by myself a little bit so that I am kind of like happy with it. And then if there's no need to kind of like show it to, like if there were no other like questions about it, I just kind of like take, I usually, what I like to do personally is like I like to sit on it for like a day just to kind of like, okay, I sleep on it, see if tomorrow maybe something else comes up. And then I like open it up and I'm like, okay, well, I'll do some finishing touches, and then I show the final. And if there's no like revisions needed, if there's no complaints, then that's the final. So that's kind of the process.
Cool.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brennan.
So would you say that it feels fun still to do these art pieces? There's still a level of enjoyment, or is it more at this point has become more like I'm working, or is there still a level of I'm enjoying this?
I do enjoy, like it is a little different for sure compared to when I was starting, because when I was starting I didn't have any like my stakes were pretty low. I was like, hey, I'll try this, and if it doesn't work out, whatever, I'll pull people through therapy or some shit. I don't know. But yeah, because that's my field apparently.
Right.
But so when at this point, when this is pretty much my living, and it's like I pretty much work on big projects right now that like I can't afford quitting, let's say. So at this point, the question for me really comes like from whether I'm like overworking, because if I'm on a project, if somebody if I get to do a project and there's no there are some projects like that where I'm working on it and I feel like I would need to pull a bit more weight, because otherwise I will be disappointed with like the overall result, let's say. So in some cases I feel that, but usually I make it a habit to like quit projects like that more quicker, kind of like just to get to a new one or something. But I do enjoy like the art itself, like just drawing and just like working on this for sure. And the thing that's really good about like doing this for a living is that when like kind of like the difference that it makes is you don't really have to, because there is a lot of pressure doing it, like trying to get into a job, because you're like, am I doing fine? Am I doing like, like you don't really know until you get the job, but once you already have experience in the industry, with 15 years in anybody in any field, if you have 15 years of experience, you're kind of pretty much going to get hired, like regardless of your portfolio. Essentially, you go into a company, it's like, hey, I worked on this and this for these companies. They're just going to hire you like straight up. So like, there's kind of like a bit of more security, like after you've been in the industry for a while, that you don't really like stress out as much about it being like a job, or like, do I, am I doing good like by working here? Like, do I need to find a better job? You kind of like have a bit more freedom in that sense. So
yeah, that makes sense. It's always I think terrifying getting into a new field, but at the end of the day, now you're in it, right? Was this, you were talking earlier about the Ouroboros, I think was this what you were referring to? Brennan can share.
Sorry, my computer's lagging behind. There we go.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one. Yeah, that's really cool. When you, I question about colors, I guess. what makes you decide what colors to use in in a piece like this?
I see it a little. Sorry, maybe this is just with the sharing. I see it a little saturated. Like I see it a little bright. I don't know if that's based on the sharing. Was that?
It might. I don't know if it was mocked
It's
up.
because basically like the piece that I've done is like way darker, just the way I see it. So maybe maybe there was like a little bit of like brightness going on. I don't know how this would look in print. So in the end, when publishing does it, they may like adjust something.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. And the colors, I mean, well, this just made sense to me because like this thing like kind of chases itself, tries to eat it. So like the red, to simplify, like it's blood, like its own blood, like that like at least that part like made sense to me. And I mean, red and blue is like a classic combination, honestly. So like just a red like a blue galaxy and like some red stuff in the mix, that kind of like made sense to me. Just from, I didn't really like the color stuff. In some cases, I think like harder about it, but in this one, this was like a very like almost purely instinct. Like I was just like, hey, I'm gonna draw this cool, space war like eating itself with all this. So it was like this piece was in a sense very like just going intuitive like on the things that I wanted to do. So but yeah, some pieces do take color a bit. When you have like some specific things to draw out, you kind of need to pay attention a bit more. Like certain things you can't really, whatever. Like let's say there is like a piece that has a lot of fire, you can't really make the fire green because it just would be weird. Like if it has to be like fire, unless it's like hey, the necromancer turned the fire as green. But if it's like straight up fire, you have to make it like orange, reds, and yellows and all that stuff. And then if a character design happens to have these colors, it's just monotone. And that's what kind of like sucks. You need to figure out like other lighting and other like effects to break it up. Otherwise, it's all kind of orange. But if you have a bit more freedom, you can like fudge a bit and just make it like a good color combination.
Yeah, makes sense.
You mentioned the print for the art. Did you ever get a physical copy of the work, and was that something that you wanted?
I think Joseph, maybe I'm still gonna get it. So I think I was moving at the time the Kickstarter was finishing, and he was asking where to send me, and I have the PDF, but because that's easy to get. But he was asking me like, "Hey, I'm gonna mail it to you," but it was also like the book is like 20 pounds or something. I don't know. So it was like he was like saying, "Hey, I want to send you the like a copy." And I was like, hey, can you delay a bit? Because I'm like, I'm going to move like in 2 weeks and I don't know when I'll settle. And I just kind of like, I think like a couple of months passed by and I need to get back to him to just kind of like sort it out. But yeah, I remember he was like talking I remember actually somebody random when the Kickstarter finished also emailed me, and he was like from the Kickstarter. He was like, hey, like, do you know anything about the books? I think there was like some delay a little bit or something. And he was asking me about it, and I just, I had to contact Joseph because I'm not really sorting shipping or anything. So, and that was the time when I also got back to him like a little bit and briefly talked. So yeah, I don't have the physical copy, but I did kind of like scroll through. That's how I also saw. I saw some sketches before from other artists, but that's how I saw the other art as well.
Yeah,
and yeah, it looks good. The whole book.
I'm gonna throw up. Just because we talked about it earlier, this is the sketch for the Abominations.
Yeah.
And you had shared it with us. Just so that people get a chance to see it, because I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is me trying to put it like there's not much here in terms of like just kind of like the shapes of these creatures, characters. But it was like me trying to show Joseph like, hey, this still needs to split in some way because it's like potentially going to go between 2 pages. So it's like they have to be like this kind of like binary. These guys on this side, these guys, like here. and like how they can fit on the canvas. And yeah, I showed them that, and it was kind of like, hey, yeah, let's go with this. So
Amazing.
Such a cool sketch.
Yeah. Should we talk about the famous art piece? The one that I said was my favorite before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll throw it up
Yeah.
there, Brennan. You can ask the questions.
Definitely.
I got to pull it up, though. Hold on. Oh, no, I got it. Okay, perfect. Share window. You can ask a question while I figure it out. Oh, I got it. No, I got it. Share.
Yeah, so this piece here is a very beloved piece by the entire fandom as a whole.
Yeah.
And this is something that we all have collectively like pictured in our minds for years now. So much so, I was talking to one of my friends, and they swore that it had been around since the early 2000s, because this art piece just embodied what we pictured for so long, and did a really good job of it. This features characters from the Clone Wars show, with the three characters, the father, the son, and the daughter. We're looking into this lake, and I wanted to ask, were you given like visual depictions from the show for constructing the art piece?
I think so. Yeah, I think for the frontal figures, I was given some like basic. I don't remember if it's for all of them. I think there was like mixed kind of description somewhere, like having, like some screenshots or something like for. But overall, I mean, the foreground characters were, I think I like it was kind of like a mix where, like, especially the colors, like, the green hair and stuff like that. It was mostly like description, because I don't really recall any. I think the only colors that I was relying on from references was for the like the pyramid and stuff, that I decided not to do pink anyway. So for these, it was kind of like a mix. And in the end, it was like, I remember this, the font of was it the font of knowledge, or what was it?
Like a pool of knowledge and the font of power, or something like that, I think.
Yeah. And I remember, like, with Joseph talking about it, and he was like talking about like how this he was saying like, yeah, this has to be like a bit, like unnerving a bit or something like that. And I was like, okay, say no more. But it was like he was like essentially like it felt like this was one of the first pieces that I've done as well, along with when the protagonist gets pulled by into darkness. It was like one of the first pieces that I sketched out and showed them, and essentially like there was still me trying to figure out, like, can I make this dark? Can I make this, like how close to my actual own style can I make it? And Joseph was fine with this, so it worked out well as well.
The character in white is Abeloth, who is an embodiment of evil, essentially, that goes back to a book series called Fate of the Jedi. And we don't really have many official depictions of her. We have some fan art for her. Were you given some fan art as reference? Because it's very reminiscent to me of some fan art pieces that I've seen.
Yeah, I do believe there was something, though. I think there was, from what I recall. I mean, this was the first one, so this was like 4 years ago. But this was, I believe there were like, the way Joseph, I think, explained to me, there were like a version. She was like turning, like after like using the font in the pool or something. She was like turned into this, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think there was like a version that he showed me of what this person was before the actual, So I think that was the main. And yeah, I may recall I don't remember specifics, but I think my point was to actually make it like different in some ways, to make it like this, like creepy, like also like turn into this abomination kind of like thing, transforming. So I think it was like, I don't remember like any references specifically. I think it was like a woman in white, kind of like mostly something like that. But I don't really like remember like design features, let's say. So yeah, I mean maybe I'm just misremembering, but yeah, I do recall kind of like the basics of the piece. I just don't remember if the references informed like that specific kind of like thing. Probably like you say, but yeah.
What I love about this piece, what's brilliant about it, is like just the amount of detail that you see, and like it's really hard to see, but if you even zoom in, for Abeloth's face, like in the novels, she's described as having like silver, starry eyes, and you can kind of see a glint of that in her eye, which I think is so hard to capture, but you've managed to capture it somehow. And it's really good. I mean, if there was ever a piece of art I would hang in my house that was Star Wars related, other than the poster that I have behind me on the wall, it would be this. It's so cool.
I mean, I can send you if you want to print it.
I might take you up on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's again, it was fun. This is still me like trying to probe the essence of this book at first. So this is the first illustration, and this is where I was like, yeah, I don't mind doing this because, well, not that I don't mind, but as in before I was like kind of like, okay, you insist that you say that my style is going to be fine, but let's do these first ones. And then I did, the very first picture, then this one, and I think the other was, I'm looking, I don't remember what the third piece that I've first done was, but it was basically like these kind of like 3 pieces that I've done, and he was fine with all of them, like being like these kind of like darker, kind of like these more creepy, unnerving depictions. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, we can work together, I suppose, because I wasn't sure if it was gonna be like this dark of a kind of setting, or if it was gonna be like something more brighter,
If you had the opportunity, would you ever work for Star Wars again? Granted that it would fit your style, if it was a darker project of any kind.
The West, I mean, I would say like there are definitely parts of. I'm not saying that like Star Wars is like really kind of like bright and colorful and whatever. Like there are dark parts in Star Wars in general for sure. But like as a whole, like the stuff that I do a lot is more. It's just the theme, I guess, because in Star Wars there's like lots of like the way I picture it, like in going from movies, let's say. In Star Wars, there's like a lot of kind of, it's very hopeful in a sense. Like I don't really, I don't really sense, it's like very like a hero's journey kind of like stuff, and the things that I work on is usually like, like Dark Souls kind of shit. So it's it's like very, very grim in just like the way it's portrayed. It's not even just about like being dark in terms of like the visual. It's just like the whole premise of it is like very depressing in a way, like despair, like misery, like that kind of thing, and a lot of kind of phobias as well, where like a lot of darkness, where it's like it's not just like dark, it's like, hey, I'm afraid of like what's in the dark, that kind of thing. And so this is that first piece was kind of like that, where there's this like creepy like darkness with hands, and it's like, it could be just darkness, but it's like hands, and it just makes it creepy. And so it's like I don't picture like any of like Star Wars movies having that kind of visual, is what I'm saying. Like I can't picture like Luke Skywalker being pulled up like by a cloud of like dark hands. Like it's just going to be, it pulls it in a slightly different vibe thematically, I would say. Even though there's dark, like I mean, Darth Vader scenes are really dark. Like I mean, Darth Vader, and like even honestly, like even stuff like all these like Kylo Ren and all these like guys, like all this, like these scenes are like they're dark, and there's like dark thematics going on, but it's not that kind of dark where it's like on a phobia level, where it's like, hey, there's something in the darkness that's not just like a guy with a red lightsaber. There's a bit beyond,
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, if they make something like that, if they make something like, Lovecraftian Star Wars story, sure. But I just basically I don't picture movies of Star Wars being like that. But
Have you played Dark Souls before? Because you referenced it.
Oh yeah, like by this point, or before I worked on the.
No, I mean at this point.
In general, yeah, I played all the Dark Souls. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that series too.
Stuff.
Yeah. What advice would you give for someone who is just, getting into the art field, like one aspiring artist of the darker variety?
Of the darker variety, I mean, I guess study psychology and then. No, but I mean, honestly, it's also a question that I get asked a lot, and especially lately, the question kind of comes. It's a bit like, there's like all these basically AI image generators that are coming up.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are kind of like, they're like unsure of like what to make of this, because people use it, but it's like, can you like, what are you going, like, suppose you're a person that uses AI generators to make like a piece, and then like, what does it mean? Can you actually like, is that do you need to learn art? If you do this, do you need to learn how to paint? And the thing is that I like was my previous studio, it was like half a year ago or something. I tried. There's like 4 of us, we were all professional artists, and we're like, what does it mean right now to be like an artist in the industry? We're like, hey, can we actually? We took a week and we were like, hey, can we use AI? Can we use like these image generators to actually make a project just with them? And we couldn't. And so the idea became to me is that like it's going to be harder for artists to actually get into the industry, because what's going to happen is you're going to see these image generators that they're going to render subpar results. They're going to render really fast stuff that looks on the surface like, all right, you can, if you're not picky, you can pick something that's like, yeah, I can put this on some, if I'm self-publishing and I don't have $500 even to pay like some cover artists, I'm going to pay like $20 to subscribe to some of that and just have like a random image of like a dragon like flying, and that's my fantasy novel, let's say. And so this will discourage like beginner artists, because why would they learn 3 years of art if you can just for $20 subscribe to do this, to get this result, right? So that's a bit depressing. But the thing is that to push past that on a bigger project where things need to be consistent, you just can't do that. So like it's gonna fall apart, and that's what we tried with my team, because we couldn't replicate the results what we would have done by ourselves, let's say. And so my advice is, it's not to get discouraged, essentially, because in the end, like my job is less about like, if it was just me doing art. To be fair, a lot of artists do make money by just being popular, and then they go to Patreon or something like that, and they people support them because they like the art. So that's one way. But working on like bigger projects, don't get discouraged. And if you like, if you want to do something, if you're like doing something consistently, it's going to be like way better than like random results, like just random images. So yeah. if you can make, if you even like a personal project, if you're like, hey, like what would it mean if I redesigned, Lord of the Rings as a sci-fi novel, something like that, and you do like Gandalf as a techno wizard or something, and you start doing these kind of designs just for the fun of it, let's say, but that's your personal project. And once you design it, somebody who like, even my studio, like somebody like us, what we're gonna look for when we're hiring artists is going to be like somebody like this, because we don't care about a guy who's going to just do a random piece that I can Google up and have 100 pieces like that, or that AI can generate. We're looking for something that's going to be consistent, and that's going to be like really kind of like, taking one design and kind of like running with it, or taking like one story and like running with it. And if it's a consistent kind of like output, and like a consistent kind of like quality and stuff, consistent style, that's going to work out better than just like, doing something like random here and there. And yeah, so the AI thing is just, I mention it because it's something that like, I teach sometimes, like, students come up to me and stuff, and this stuff comes up a lot now. And so they ask me a lot. So I figured like to bring it up. So AI, it's in the end, my job is working on a project and figuring out, like, I'm solving visual solutions in a sense that when somebody comes up to me, they need to talk to me first, like, in English or whatever. And sure. Then I put it on paper. They're not like, I'm not on paper, on canvas. I'm not like solving a problem where I read like some tag words where it's like, mountain, dragon, wizard, whatever, and that's the piece I compose. I need to there's more thinking involved in being an artist than just like painting. And that's like the thing that AI will never, there's still this communication process that needs to happen, because with the AI, it just doesn't exist. And so that's kind of like what I can like basically say, like, don't get discouraged, because in the end, it's, everybody worries about being replaced, especially by like robots. but it's it's still not there yet. And art is also therapeutical. So if if it's kind of like why I started doing it as well. I liked it, and I eventually became a career. But art is good to practice just for the hell of it. Like it helps you, art, music, poetry, all of these kind of things, writing, like all like creative writing, all that stuff. If you do it even just for yourself, it helps you in mentally and just like in other ways. So if you want to do art, just do it for yourself. And then once you get to a point where like, hey, I want to do this as a career, or as a job, or just take some commissions, you can try that. But there's no reason not to start if you want to.
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer, and the AI stuff does weigh heavily on a lot of us. So
Yeah.
it's nice to get an actual artist perspective on it, because I don't think I have yet. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
And talking about your amazing art pieces, and thank you for them. We really enjoy them.
Yes.
With this book.
Brennan will link all of your information in the description to the video, so that people can reach out to you or look at your art, for instance. I know that you have, I think, you have your own website, which is chriscold.com.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have stuff on ArtStation, I think I've seen, and
an Instagram page.
Yeah.
Instagram, something like that is
Instagram.
fine.
Yeah.
I'm not really picky. I'm easy to Google, honestly, so it's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. No, and if you do Google Chris, you will see all of his amazing art. So I strongly recommend.
Yeah, definitely go check out his pieces. They're really great. So thank you for taking the time to do this with us, and thank you for the people who watched. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you very much, and I guess I'll see you guys later as well sometime.
Yeah,
for sure.